A flood that covers the entire earth. 8 survivors on a wooden boat, an altar built in the wreckage, and a promise, spoken over a world God knows has not changed. Rainbow, weapon bow, hung in the clouds, the same evil heart, the same faithful God. A completely different plan. Here is the question. This covenant forces. Why does God make an unconditional promise to a world he knows is still broken? Genesis 8:21. After the flood waters recede, after the ark rests on the mountains, after Noah builds an altar and offers burnt offerings, God smells the pleasing aroma and says, I will never again curse the ground because of man. And then, in the same breath, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. The reason for the promise is not that humanity improved. It is that God already has another way. Let's walk through it. To understand why God made the covenant with Noah, you have to understand why the flood happened in the first place. Genesis 6:5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Every intention, only evil, continually. This is not a description of a bad generation that needs correction. This is a civilization that has become entirely inverted, where what is designed for life is being used for death, where the image of God has been so distorted that violence fills the earth. Genesis 6:11. The earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God grieves. Genesis 6:6. The Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. The Creator grieves over what his creation has become. This is not an impersonal judge issuing a verdict from a distance. This is a God whose heart is broken by what he sees. But Noah. Genesis 6:8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. The Hebrew word for favor is Chen, grace. Noah found grace. Not because he was perfect. Genesis 9 will show Noah's own failure clearly enough, but because God extended grace to him, and through him, to the entire human race. The ark is not an escape from judgment. It is a vessel of preservation through judgment. The waters rise. The world that was is destroyed. Everything outside the ark is subject to the covenant curse that began in Genesis 3. But the ark carries the line of the woman's seed, the line through which the promise of Genesis 3:15 will be fulfilled. Without the ark, there is no Abraham. Without the ark, there is no David. Without the ark, the seed promise is extinguished before it reaches its fulfillment. Genesis 8:21. After the flood, God says something that should stop us. The intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. This is God's assessment of humanity after the judgment that was supposed to cleanse the earth. The flood did not solve the problem. 8 people survived, and the problem survived with them. Because the problem is not environmental, it is not social, it is not behavioral. The problem is the human heart, and water cannot reach the human heart. So why does God promise never to do this again? Not because the flood failed, not as an admission of defeat, but because God has already decided what the solution is, and it is not another flood. The solution to an evil heart is not external judgment. It is internal transformation. And that transformation requires a different kind of covenant, a different kind of work, a different kind of blood than the blood of animals on an altar. God knows where this is going. He knows what Genesis 3:15 set in motion. And so he commits. I will not flood the earth again, not because you deserve it, but because I have another way. Genesis 9:8-11. Then God said to Noah and to his sons, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. The scope of this covenant is unlike anything that came before. It is not with a particular family, not with a chosen nation, not with a priestly tribe or a royal line. It is with every living creature, every bird, every animal, every human being who will ever live. The Noahic covenant is universal in a way no other covenant is. This means something significant. The stability of creation is not conditional on human faithfulness. The seasons will continue. The harvests will come. Day and night will not cease. This is God's commitment to the whole created order, not because the creation deserves it, but because God has said so, and God keeps his word. Genesis 9:13. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. The rainbow. Most people see it as a colorful reminder that God won't flood the earth again. But the Hebrew word for rainbow is the same word used throughout the Old Testament for a weapon bow. Qeshet, the bow of a warrior, the instrument of judgment. What God is doing in Genesis 9 is hanging up his weapon. The divine warrior who brought the flood, the one who deployed the waters of judgment against the earth, is now placing his bow in the clouds, not aimed at the earth, aimed at the sky, or perhaps aimed at himself. Every time the rain comes and the rainbow appears, the sign in the sky is not just a promise, it is a weapon at rest. A reminder that the judge of the earth has committed not to deploy his full judgment again. Not until the appointed time, and not in this way. But here is the theological question the Noahic covenant raises most sharply. If the human heart is still evil, if the problem remains unsolved, why doesn't God simply start over? The answer is in Genesis 3:15. God already made a promise. A seed is coming. The offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's head. That promise requires a continuous human line. It requires that the world keep going long enough for the seed to arrive. God does not start over after the flood, because starting over would break the promise he already made. The Noahic covenant is not God abandoning his original plan. It is God protecting it. The rainbow is the sign that history will continue, that the line will not be cut off, that the seed will come. If this is the kind of study you have been looking for, where we go past the Sunday school version and into what the text actually says, subscribe before we go further. The next section is where it gets even deeper. The Noahic covenant introduces something that theologians call common grace, because the covenant is with all of humanity, not just believers, not just Israel. It provides a foundation for the stability and order of the whole world. The sun rises on the evil and the good. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. Matthew 5:45. The seasons continue. The harvests come. Art, music, science, civilization, all of these are possible because God is committed to preserving the created order, regardless of human faithfulness. This has enormous implications. When an unbeliever discovers a truth about the physical world, they are benefiting from the Noahic covenant. When governments establish justice, when medicine heals the sick, when beauty appears in unexpected places, all of this is downstream of God's commitment in Genesis 9 to preserve the world he made. Common grace is not saving grace. It does not bring anyone into relationship with God. But it is real grace, given freely, universally, to every human being who draws breath under the rainbow sky. Jesus himself connects the days of Noah to the final judgment. Matthew 24:37. As were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. The flood is a type, a pattern, a preview of something larger that is still coming. Noah entered the ark, and the judgment fell. Christ will return, and the final judgment will fall. 1 Peter 3:20-21 draws this connection explicitly. The ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Baptism now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The ark, the one vessel that carries the faithful through the waters of judgment, is a type of Christ, the only shelter, the only way through. 2 Peter 3 takes this further. The world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. But by the same word, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, kept until the day of judgment. The Noahic covenant promises no more flood. It does not promise no more judgment. The next judgment will not be water. It will be fire. The creation will be purified and renewed, not just washed, but transformed. The temporary preservation that the rainbow guarantees will give way to a permanent new creation. This is why the Noahic covenant is not the end of the story. It is a holding pattern, a committed preservation of the world long enough for everything God has promised to be fully accomplished. What does it mean to live under the Noahic covenant? It means that every morning you wake up is a covenant morning. The sun that rises is rising because God keeps His word. The food you eat grows from ground that is stable because God promised it would be. The civilization you inhabit, with all its laws and art and medicine, exists because God decided to preserve the world rather than restart it. And it means living with the knowledge that the preservation is not permanent. The rainbow is not a promise that everything is fine. It is a promise that there is still time. Time for the seed to do its work. Time for the gospel to reach every nation. Time for the full number of the redeemed to come in. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slow to fulfill His promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. The rainbow is patience. The rainbow is time. And the one who hung it in the clouds is the same one who sent His Son into the world, not to condemn it, but to save it. The next covenant in this series changes the scope of everything. God calls a man named Abram out of Ur, not because Abram is righteous. Joshua 24:2 says his family worshipped other gods. God simply calls him and makes 3 promises: land, descendants, and blessing for all nations. That third promise, all nations, is Genesis 3:15, breaking open again. The seed is not for one family. The seed is for the world. But before that promise can be understood, something strange happens in Genesis 15. God puts Abram to sleep and walks through the pieces alone. What God was agreeing to carry in that moment is what the next video is about. The Noahic covenant answers the question the flood raises. Does God give up? He doesn't. He preserves. He promises. He hangs his weapon in the clouds and commits to keep the world going long enough for every word he has spoken to be fulfilled. The rainbow is not a children's story. It is a cosmic commitment that the line will not be cut off, the seed will come, and the judgment when it falls will be the last one, not a reset, but a completion. subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. God bless you.